Hey, sorry, man.
We are on the air.
Yep. Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Beneville, and welcome to Nome, Alaska, about 100 miles from the Bering Strait, about as far west as you can go in the United States, the continental or on the continent, and be close to Russia. We are a fishing community. We are a gold rush town here in Nome, and we live right on the edge of the Bering Sea. And if I turn my head to the right, and if I could turn my camera, you'd see a little bit of ice floating out in the ocean in this beautiful, beautiful slate blue Bering Sea. It's just gorgeous on a gorgeous early spring day. Sitting next to me is a young man that I've gotten to know here in the last several days. His name is Forrest Dunbar, and he is running for the House of Representatives in Washington. Alaska is interesting in representation because we're huge, but we have a very small population. Just recently went over 700,000, I think, only just a little over.
I think the last census was 729,000.
729,000 in a state that is, sorry, Texas, hello, Central, much bigger. Much bigger than Alaska. It's huge, it's huge. So we have one representative in Washington and two senators. And our senators today are Mrs. Lisa Murkowski and Mark Begich, but one Republican, one Democrat. The gentleman to my left here, Forrest, is running against an incumbent of some 20 terms in the House of Representatives. That means he's mounted 20 campaigns, 40 years in the House of Representatives, and amazing, to be in public service for 40 years, connotes a certain amount of, dedication. It's also not a bad job.
Yeah.
It's not a bad job. Nome, here perched out on the end of the Seward Peninsula, has been the host for the Alaska State Democratic Convention that was held here the last several days. It was over yesterday. And so Forrest has been up here pressing the flesh, I think. Forrest, welcome to Nome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome
I appreciate
to Hello Central.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed. I've been here since Thursday night, and I've really enjoyed my time in Nome. And the convention was great. And yesterday I went with you out to Teller, which was a really cool experience.
It was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful drive, and the town itself was really interesting.
If you get a map or Google Nome, and then kind of pull back and look at the region. And not only are we close to the Bering Sea, but our topography here is one of mountains and mountain-covered tundra. And 350 miles of road, it's got to get that in. Hello Central, that you can drive out. It is absolutely spectacular. It's that other Alaska. But it is also the Alaska of the Inupiaq Eskimo. We are a 60-some-odd% Native Alaskan in this town of Nome. Our population is about 3,600, and the majority, just a little more than the majority, a little, you know what I mean, the majority are Native Alaskans, and the rest are, we're a gold rush town, founded primarily because of the discovery of gold in 1898. We are also a part of Alaska. We're also a part of the United States of America, and we're very, very proud of that. So our politicians we take very seriously, because how would you describe the politics of, in the bush Alaska, which is rural Alaska, as opposed to urban Alaska? What are the major differences that you see?
Well, I want to start by saying a lot of people don't know who I am yet in this area.
I should do that. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. Just to introduce myself a little. So I actually grew up in rural Alaska. Until I was 7, I lived in Eagle on the Yukon River.
That's right, you said that.
Not too far from Dawson City. And when I was 7, we moved to Cordova, which is where my parents live now, and I went to high school there and all that. I live in Anchorage now. I've lived there for about 2 years, but I still consider myself very much from rural Alaska.
You know it.
I know it.
I sense it.
Well, I will say that, people talk about rural Alaska like it's all one thing, like it's one monolith. But the truth is there are different. Rural Alaska itself is extremely diverse. So I know Cordova, and I know Eagle, and I know those experiences. But Nome is different, and Kotzebue is different, Bear is different. All those things are different. So I wouldn't claim to know at this stage that I know what it's like to live everywhere in Alaska. Nobody does. And that's actually why I've really enjoyed visiting different parts of the state. So you mentioned the Inupiaq population here. The population of even Alaska Natives in Cordova is very different. primarily Aleut, Tlingit, used to be Eyak, and they have very different culture. So while I do feel comfortable in rural Alaska, perhaps more so than some people from Anchorage, I would never claim that I really know or understand everywhere in the state yet, and that's why I'm going out and trying to learn.
But and to your credit, because you must know the people you're representing, and it's difficult. I said this is the land of the Inupiaq Eskimo. Well, that is very true, but it's also the land of the Siberian Yupik Eskimo,
Absolutely.
and we have the Yupik Eskimo.
Sure.
But this is the world of the Eskimo, and we are that continues all the way to the Canadian border, Kaktovik, and so let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
There's a local politician that gave a speech via video, Hollis French.
Yes.
That he's a well-respected politician and Democrat and worker on behalf of his party. Now he quoted. I thought this was fabulous. What are the differences between Democrats and Republicans? Beside the mascots and beside the color, what are the differences between Democrat and Republican? And he quoted a politician. Do you remember who he quoted? It was 19th century.
Yes, I think he had something about the property and the people.
Yes, he said, and then when the guy's comment was, when they were talking about parties and all of that, and he said, well, we have two. And he said, one is Democrat and we have one Republican. And he said, Democrats, are a party of people, and Republicans are a party of property. Now that sounds pretty harsh. But it is, in America over the years, in the 70 years I've been on the planet, you kind of, if you're if you're Republican, you're very often leaning to the corporate side of America, to the business side of America, to the bottom line side of America. And if you're a Democrat, sometimes we take a hard rap for it. Oops, I just disclosed that I'm a Democrat. Oh, well. You have, it's of the people with things and programs and the poor and equality and all of those things. And I'm not trying to be the opposite of Tea Party, but I'm just trying to there are some basic fundamental differences.
Yes.
Urban Alaska.
Yes.
Is, and we're a blue state. Are we blue or red? Which is
we used to be blue. Now I say purple. I think that's where. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I will say in Alaska, there are few. Alaska is not a Democrat or a Republican state. Alaska is an independent state, and the vast majority of people in Alaska are independent or registered undeclared, and that sort of very much fits our collective character. We feel independent. We feel like nobody's going to tell me what to do, and I think that's healthy. So while the Republicans have had more control of Alaska in the last perhaps 2 decades, we're still very much an independent state. And I think people really care about the individual and their character more than they care about sort of broad party platforms.
Where does Forrest stand? Where do you stand? We have Alaska. We have subsistence.
Yes.
Which is, in subsistence by definition, is living off the land.
Yes.
And using the land as your larder, the ocean is your pantry, all of those things. So where do you? And it's been a contentious issue in Alaska forever.
Yeah, it has, and so you described the sort of urban and rural divide before. But the truth is, there's polling data that suggests this, that the vast majority of Alaskans, urban and rural, support a subsistence preference. And I think the subsistence preference and the respect for subsistence lifestyle is very much a part of the Alaskan culture. And it's something, again, because I grew up in rural Alaska, but more importantly, because I come out here and go to places like Teller and meet people that are clearly living off the land. I don't think you can have those experiences and not have a deep respect for and a desire to protect subsistence. And that's where I stand on it. I think it is our number one priority when it comes to managing the fisheries, for example, is protecting subsistence.
Development. Where do we stand with development? We live in a place that, and I was living in Barrow when the development of the North Slope Borough was about, they were getting everything online, the pipeline and all of that. And what an incredible impact the money from that oil has had in local communities, Barrow, all of them, Cactoba, New Ixit, Wainwright, all of those villages, incredible, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's a double-edged sword. How do you kind of feel about that?
Well, you're absolutely right that, I mean, everyone knows this, that the oil pipeline, the oil that comes through that pipeline is the backbone of our economy at the moment, and it funds the vast majority of our government. And that's problematic because, I think we need to diversify our economy. It's not smart to have all your eggs in one basket, and all of our eggs are currently in that oil and gas basket. That doesn't mean we don't want to continue to develop oil and gas. We absolutely do. But at the same time, we have to be looking for other industries, like high-tech industry in Anchorage, for example. And there's a fiber line going live to homes in 2015 in Anchorage that I think could do wonders in terms of attracting people to do high-tech jobs in Anchorage. In the rural areas, we have the fisheries, we have timber, we have mining. There's a lot of things that we can develop and develop responsibly. I'll talk about one issue in particular. I was a commercial fisherman growing up, like everybody in Cordova. I had the opportunity to work on fishing boats for a couple of summers as a kid.
Hard work.
Yeah, it was hard, but it's fun too. I was fortunate that I was on a seiner fishing salmon in Prince William Sound, and that perhaps isn't as quite so hardcore as some of the people who go out into the Bering Sea, which is much more dangerous. So because of that background, and because I also speak with a lot of people about the issue, I am opposed to the pebble mine. So in general, I'm pro mining. I think there are definitely mining projects that need to go forward, but pebble in particular, because and it's worth talking about because it's such a huge project. Pebble threatens the fishery in a way that's unique. I just think it's irresponsible to put the world's largest pit mine over its most abundant salmon fishery. And that's both because of the commercial fishing, but also obviously because there are people who've been living there for thousands of years who could see their culture destroyed if the fish go away. And so that's an example of projects that we need to be very careful about. And there are other projects that are going to provide jobs that are going to go forward. And we very much have to take a case-by-case approach. And I think it's problematic when people think that, for example, the EPA is always going to be opposed to mining projects, if that's their perception. I think that is very problematic, and we need to resist the EPA if they default to no. At the same time, I think Alaskans rightly are currently suspect of the Department of Natural Resources, especially under Dan Sullivan, who's now, of course, running for Senate, because it seemed like he was just a rubber stamp, that they were going to go forward with everything. So you need to have trust in government, and you need to have people who are in the middle, who are going to take real hard looks at every project and then come down on the merits, not come in with some preconceived notion of whether a project should go forward or not go forward. Not go forward.
I've been sitting here listening to your responses to these questions and your comments, and I find I want my audience to listen to him. Don't listen to me. Urban Alaska versus rural Alaska, subsistence versus non-subsistence or anti-subsistence or whatever, mining and development. We tend sometimes to say in absolutes.
Right. If
pebble is wrong, then all mining is wrong.
Right.
If subsistence, whatever, we tend to do that as human beings. And I think, except, and I'm going to change that, young human beings, one tends to mellow. And what I appreciate about you, Forrest, as a young person, and this is a compliment, go figure. No, but I'm serious, is you disarm that. You disarm it by saying, okay, well, and one has to. I invite my clients, my tourists, with my company, just take what I call the satellite point of view. And you kind of have to step back and look at the whole. Right. You're in Washington, D.C.
Well, I'm in Alaska, but I'm going to hopefully go to Washington.
Go to Washington.
Yes.
See, and you're representing a lot of everything. A lot of resources.
Exactly.
A lot of people.
Exactly.
A lot of all of that. That's a huge responsibility, but you have a way of depolarizing.
Well, I think that's
what you do, and that's good.
Well, I think again, it goes back to my background living in rural Alaska. And the thing about rural Alaska is you can't get away from each other, right? You're like, you're
That's right, because
like
Cordova's not connected by road either.
No, and so you have to get to know people and work with people. And I think also Alaska, like I said in particular, we value our independence. And we value not being particularly wed to any political party. And again, like you said, with young people, again, data is shown that young people are less connected to any particular party because they become so frustrated with the bitter partisanship we've seen in D.C. in particular, also in Juneau. And I think there are some structural reasons why that partisanship has developed. It's not because my generation is like inherently better or whatever, or less partisan. I think it's because of sort of historical factors and structural factors, particularly in Congress. But those are factors we can overcome. And I think we have to. And so a very formative experience for me was, I went to school and I went to school in Washington, D.C. for college. And I also had the opportunity to work in Congress, first as an intern and then as a part-time paid staffer. And I was there about 03, 04.
Who were you the staffer for?
Well, I was an intern for Senator Frank Murkowski, who was a Republican. That was my first job in politics. And then I was an intern and then a part-time staffer for Congresswoman Madeline Bordalio, and she's a Democrat from Guam, actually. Really interesting experience. And I just happened to meet her. I was at an event and I met her. Her chief of staff, who was a retired Air Force colonel, and he liked the cut of my jib, and so he hired me. I was probably 18, 19 years old at the time from Alaska. But the point is, that was a very formative experience to me, was working in D.C. in the 03, 04 sort of time frame. It was a very polarized time. Tom DeLay was ascendant. He was the majority leader of the Republican Party. And he treated people very badly if you were opposed to him. He was taking a lot of money from K Street, from the lobbyists, and he was sort of amassing power and then ramming things through. And one of the things he and the Bush administration rammed through was the Iraq War. And I was there when we were coming up on the Iraq War, and it was very clear 3 or 4 months before the war started that this war was going to happen, and there was nothing the American people or Congress could do to stop it. And I think the Iraq War, I currently serve in the Army National Guard.
I know. I was going to point that out.
I have a lot of. I did not serve. I did not deploy to Iraq, but I know a lot of people who do, and I'm not suggesting that their service is in any way diminished by going to Iraq or fighting that war, and our Army fought it honorably. But the political decision to go into that war, I think, was flawed in a number of ways, and I think it definitely. I think it impacted my generation, the people, especially the people who were in Washington, D.C. and saw this decision made and how this decision was made, and it made us draw back, I think, from partisan politics to a certain degree.
It almost brings a tear to my eye. But what you just said was said, and it happened about 40 years ago in another war called Vietnam.
Right.
And, people from this part of the world are very patriotic.
Of course.
Very patriotic. The Alaska Native, the Territorial Guard started here now. They were very, very patriotic in Western Alaska and in rural Alaska, incredibly so. And you kind of alluded that this war in Iraq was going to be something we were going to get in no matter what happened because it was there. But that's kind of what, and not everyone supported it, and certainly that was the case in Vietnam. And I couldn't help but see some commonality there. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and I think that might be good because dissent can be okay.
Well, right, and that was sort of when I said that it was going to happen regardless. I think that was what I was speaking of. That in the lead up to the Iraq War, a lot of people did voice their dissent, and they were shouted down. And we were told, and a lot of people supported the war under false pretenses. They were told there are weapons of mass destruction, and there's going to be a mushroom cloud, and all these things, and uranium from Africa, and all this stuff. Almost all of which we found out was false later on. And I think it's something that a lot of people were misled, and people in my generation, in all generations in America, should be upset about that. and not forget about it. And the military did an amazing job of sort of saving our bacon, right? Pulling our bacon out of the fire. I believe, there's no question. Our Army, our Navy, our Marines, our Air Force, our Special Forces, our Coast Guard. It was a tremendous effort to try to stabilize Iraq. And right now to try to fight the war in Afghanistan, which is a much different issue than Iraq. But the political decision making that went into that, I think, was extremely flawed. That initial decision to invade, and like I said, it was just a very it made a big change on my life, because I was a young person. I was there. I was working in Congress, and I realized, and it's actually one of the reasons that I'm running now. If people don't run for office. Some people say, the parties are exactly the same, or whoever you have in there, the things are going to be exactly the same. That's not the case. Say what you will about Al Gore. Not the hugest fan of Al Gore. But if Al Gore had been president, we would not have invaded Iraq. That was a decision made by a handful of people at the highest level of American government, and they were elected, and they made this decision. So elections matter. Who you put in office has consequences, because there are certain decision points where one person or one small group of people can make a decision that impacts everyone in Alaska, everyone in the country, even beyond.
Yeah, there's in your comments.
Yeah.
Because I didn't mean to get off on a big thing about Vietnam and about Iraq, but I'm glad you did, because it elucidated a lot on how you approach, and that is very important for what you just said.
Right.
But what the core is the involvement.
Yes.
On this show, I have said for the on and off time I've been either on radio or TV or somewhere, about voting, and it is an incredible responsibility as a citizen. It is your way to vote for those people, for or against. It does make a difference. It makes a difference to Forrest's mom, hello Central, and to Forrest, and maybe people of Alaska, but it's voting.
Yeah.
And that is what's so important. It's involvement. And his running for office is a way to be involved and to listen to the people, to try and make the decisions that come out of Washington. Democracy is a flawed, it has its flaws. But, we're an experiment that's lasted 226 years. That is very important. I'm so proud of that.
No, I completely agree. And I think, whether someone votes for me or my opponent, I think you're absolutely right that what's important is they actually go and vote. That they go to the voting booth. No, I think it's absolutely right, especially this year, because there's so many important elections this year. Obviously, there's Senator Begish's election, and then there's Byron Millott, who I believe you had on this show.
Yes,
who's running for governor.
Yes.
Who I'm a very big supporter of Byron Millott, and I just think he would be a tremendous help for the state. He's from Yakutat.
Oh, that's right. He's from Yakutat.
Yeah, but I did go. I went to Yakutat to play basketball when I was in high school.
Oh, cool.
So he's from Yakutat. But he's just an incredibly intelligent and compassionate man, but also he's a smart CEO. And he took, when he was the head of the permanent fund, he took it from $16 billion to well over $20 billion. And I think that kind of fiscal responsibility is something we absolutely need. We've got a governor now who went from record surpluses to record deficits in just 2 years, and that's irresponsible. And again,
and he's not a Democrat.
Well,
go figure.
So
that's a rap that usually Democrats get.
Well, it's not one that really holds true. I mean, the only person to balance the federal budget in the last 40 years was a Democrat, right? So I think this whole notion that Democrats maybe are less fiscally responsible from Republicans is nonsense. But again, the point is, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Most independents, and certainly most Alaskans, appreciate fiscal responsibility, and they want someone who's fiscally responsible, and Byron will be. And that's why I'm a huge supporter of his.
My wide-ranging conversation has been with Forrest Dunbar, and Forrest is running for the House of Representatives in Washington as representative from the state of Alaska.
Yes.
We have only one. Remember your civics class, gang. Every state has 2 senators, but it's population that deems how many representatives you have. So New York has 30. I don't know, got a lot of representatives.
Sure.
Alaska has but 1. So it's an incredible job. It's an incredible responsibility, certainly. But one's knowledge
Yeah.
of the issues. You know, you have to have it's a huge place with just lots of interesting things. I want to kind of wind things up. You've got another interview to do, and but I want to thank you.
Oh,
I want to
thank you.
thank you for coming to Western Alaska.
Oh, thank
I
you.
want to thank you for going to Teller yesterday.
Yeah.
I want to really thank you for that, because you know, you get out. It's one thing to come to Nome, and it's in, you know, but you get out into places like, you know, Nome or Kotzebue or Barrow, which are hubs.
Yeah.
But then if you go out to New Ixit, you go out to Atkasuk,
Right.
you go out to, you know, towns outside of Kiana, outside of Kotzebue, or here like Teller.
Right.
Very interesting.
Sure.
Sir, I wish you the very best of luck.
Oh, thank you. And you know, I hope to come back to. I'm going to come back to Western Alaska. We'll see if I have the opportunity to come back to Nome and all those places you just described. I mean, I want to go. I would love to go to literally every community in Alaska. It's just a function of time, you know. And there's just so many places. I'd love to go to Ruby and Pilot Station. I'd love to go everywhere. We might only be able to go to some of the hubs. And then go out to one or two of the villages. So, you know, I certainly am going to go to Dillingham, Kotzebue, Bethel, Barrow, and then we hope to go.
You bring up a very interesting point. Next time you're at your Google thing, if you're in Ohio or someplace, Google Alaska. Excuse me, look at Alaska. His district is immense.
Twice the size of Texas.
Twice the size of Texas.
And then some.
So, and you know, it's like campaigning. It's campaigning. How do you go out and shake hands?
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time on small aircraft. You
Yeah.
do a lot. But I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I want to
Thanks for having
thank
me
you
in
for
Nome.
coming to Nome.
I love Nome.
Oh, I love it. He loves Nome.
Nome was great. The moment I got here, I just felt this energy in the air. I really enjoyed my time in Nome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I want to invite all of you to come to Nome. If you've never been up to Alaska, come to Alaska. It's the greatest backyard America ever had. Hello, Central. And we haven't touched on things like the Arctic and what's happening there. If you look at the map, we're close to the Bering Strait. There are only two ways to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean in the Northern Hemisphere. One is the Panama Canal. The other is the Bering Strait. And it's becoming more accessible. So the challenges are immense, but fascinating, as we live in this world that progresses and changes all the time. Very best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your
again.
mom and dad still alive?
Oh yeah, they both live in Cordova.
Are
Yes.
they proud of you?
I hope so.
I think they are.
I try to please my
There's
mother.
a lot to be proud of. Thank you. Thanks for watching, and look for more interviews from Nome, Alaska, our little gold rush town here perched on the southwestern edge of the Seward Peninsula. Goodbye, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.